All right.
All right.
Hey, we're back.
Back again. And Coach, before we jump up a few years and start talking about the Minnesota Fighting Saints, I just wanted to get your comments on Herb Brooks. I almost said Coach Herb Brooks. You coached him, and of course he succeeded you as coach of the Minnesota Gophers.
Well, I really didn't coach him so much on as he was on the freshman team, but they weren't allowed to play. You know, they were, and that was my first introduction to him. And so I did coach him, but not in a league thing. But then when I came here as the head coach, Herb came on board as my assistant, and you knew there was something special about him right then. And in my opinion, he may be as good a coach as anybody I've ever met. We were kidding a bit about, or talking about Freddie Shiro, who I was introduced to in my playing career and watched. But both Herbie and Freddie had something very, very special about him. And I've heard people say, well, Herbie couldn't really produce at the pro level. He was on, that's nonsense. If you look it up, he won 100 games with the New York Rangers faster than any coach had ever won before. He's just absolutely a superlative coach.
Now, do you think he'll be coaching again soon, or what do you?
We heard rumors are always flying around about Herbie, but one rumor had been that Pittsburgh is getting ready to have him take over. I don't know. What I did hear that makes sense is they're not going to name any coach in Pittsburgh until Mario's gone, because Mario's coaching right now. And Craig Patrick took over for himself for a while, and I don't know. But certainly I would think that's a possibility.
Would be good to see Herbie back in the NHL again. No question about it.
Absolutely.
Should we jump up to the WHA days?
Yeah, let's talk Fighting Saints.
Let's talk the Minnesota Fighting Saints.
That was a favorite stretch for me.
The WHA, I think it's pretty much safe to say, comparing WHA, NHL would be like AFL, NFL.
That's
ABA,
the best example.
NBA.
That's the best example.
More freewheeling, wide open, more characters. Pretty safe to say.
It was. It wasn't a minor league. You know, people say, well, in the extent that, well, I mean, it wasn't as good as the National League, but I mean, we were competing for. If you remember, the WHA got its credibility by going and getting Bobby Hull. Once they had Bobby Hull, they were credible. Now we got some great players. I mean, on this Saints team, we had Dave Keon, who's a Hall of Famer, Johnny McKenzie. We had Shaky Walton, who was. But what you'd have some of those spectacular guys, and then you better get some guys in the trenches and some guys that would battle. And we had guys like Antonovich come and be very good. Billy Butters came, and it was when I look back on it, there were fun times, and we were a very entertaining team. I have the people around here still come up to me and stop me sometimes and will say that was some of the most fun we ever had was going over there, and it was a shame that thing did not succeed.
Yep, I agree. Now, what were the circumstances in you coaching the Fighting Saints? How did that come about?
Well, I was at the university, and I'd been there. I was in my sixth year, or my sixth year was coming up, I believe, and we had just been in a national championship, and they came, some representatives of this team, and said, would I come over there? And they took me and showed me that big building going up that now they're saying is outdated, but they were just building it then. And you just get I loved it at the university, but I just thought, well, this is a chance to try this. So I asked them now. They said, can you be both general manager and coach? And this was in November of '71 to start playing in October of '72. So I had 11 months, and I said, yeah, I can right now, certainly, because there's no coaching, but I will take both jobs if you allow me to hire my own guy to come with me. And I had a friend from my Canadian days, Harry Neal, who I had definitely in mind, and I brought on board with me, and that was a great. So we were together through those years, and that was a great time.
Well, we'll have to talk about a few of the players. One we were talking about before. Guy you've been intertwined with for quite a while, Paul Holmgren.
Yeah, Paul Holmgren.
One of your favorites.
One of my favorites.
One of your all-time
He's absolutely one of the toughest guys I've ever had, and an outstanding player, too. And we were able to get him because, we would tell him, you're going to play here right away, where he had landed, you remember, guys, they called it the $50,000 punch in the playoffs in the NCAA play. I forget who they were playing, but we heard about it. I was coaching the Saints, and of course, and the Gophers were in, and at the end of one of the games or something, Paul had just KO'd somebody, and they said, well, he was going to be done with college hockey then, and we moved in quickly then. And the $50,000 was the bonus or something at that time, signing bonus. So they said it was a $50,000. But he was just a great player, and he only played that 1 year with us. We were going out of business then, unfortunately, and then I did have Freddie Shiro and I had been friends playing together in Cleveland, and I can take some credit for this. They were in town playing the North Stars, the Flyers, and I went to lunch with Freddie, and I said, Freddie, I know you, and I'm just going to tell you this: go and get Holmgren. I don't care what your scouts say. I know the kind of players you want.
Right.
And so he said, yeah, and they did, and he's had a great career with the Flyers. Was a big part of their successes, and he happily still working with them as a pro scout with them now. Yeah.
Now, was that also the same place you had Jack Carlson?
Yeah.
First time? Tell us about the Minnesota folk hero himself, Jack Carlson.
I just spoke at the Vulcan banquet the other night, and they were talking. That's where Jack Carlson, there's some guys here who were great in junior hockey then, Harry Brown, Ron Woody, and those kind of people. And they were struggling around to have some teams. And here these kids were coming down from Virginia to play there. And then we had, as a publicity stunt, with the Fighting Saints to get some stuff. We didn't think we'll ever find it. We had open tryouts, we're going to take all the Minnesota kids who wanted, and here came these three guys, just like you see them in Slapshot with the big glasses we're out there. I was saying this the other night, and I mean this, guys, a big mistake we made, and Harry Neal and I laugh about this yet. We should have, they maybe weren't quite ready to play at that level as a line, but we should have persevered for a little while because they were, and I had a father-in-law at that time who was running the Johnstown team in the Eastern Hockey League, and that's where they went to play after, and that's where they took the Slapshot movie right out of there. And what that movie, it's jazzed up, but that's what happened. Hockey was dying in Johnstown, and these kids went in and they had big posters of them all over town, and they revitalized hockey in Johnstown. And eventually, of course, Jack came and was a very, very big part of some of our North Star teams here.
All right. And how about another guy, I know one of your favorites you mentioned before, Mike Shaky Walton.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, we were very fortunate to get him through Harry Neal's connection. Harry knew all that crew, the Keon Walton Hockey School. We got Keon after a while later, who's a National Hockey League Hall of Famer now. But Walton was the pièce de résistance with this team as far as we had a pretty competitive team, and we could make the playoffs and we could compete, but we didn't have the real flair and everything. And Walton, I remember Harry telling me, Harry Neal said, Glenn, we'll get this guy, I'll guarantee he'll score a ton of goals, but not only that, about 20 of them will be the most electrifying goals you've ever seen in your life. And don't expect him in our end of the rink too often, but he'll and he did. And he was fun. He was making $150,000 while Antonovich and Butters and these guys were making 20. So you think you might have trouble on your team, but everybody loved Shaky. He would have the parties in his up in his suite on the road, and he'd pay for everything.
Took care of the boys.
He went to, one quick story, guys. He went to the racetrack in Los Angeles with all the guys. The guys couldn't wait to tell me. They said, Coach, wait till you hear what he did now. I said, what did he do? He lost $600 at the racetrack. As he was coming out, there was a kid selling papers. Called the kid over, Shaky, gave him the paper, gave him $20. Keep the change, kid. The kid's looking $20 for paper, and so they looked at Shaky. Shaky says, 600, 620. What the hell's the difference? But that tells you what Shaky.
Now, why don't we talk a little bit about the Birmingham Bulls?
Oh, yeah. That got me in more trouble. Well, you got to remember, guys, we went down there. And right away I could tell that was Bear Bryant country, and what they wanted. They didn't play the national anthem; they played Dixie and waved the flag and everything. And they said when they'd ask how are you going to play them, and I picked this up from Bear Bryant because I knew they'd love it. When they'd ask Bear Bryant how his team was going to play, he'd say, "We're going to put the hurt on them," HURT. So when they'd ask me how are you going to play, I'd say, "We're going to put the hurt on them." And we had some guys that could put the hurt on you, I'll tell you. And those fans we had some tough guys, but we might have gone over the line a little. We had a couple of real crazy. Durbano was a wild.
He's something else.
Yeah. When I say what got me in trouble was, I like to have some fun sometime. And we'd go up in Winnipeg and play. And Winnipeg had Hull and Nielsen and all those flashy players, and they didn't want to see Durbano and these guys go after him. And so I can remember being interviewed on TV, and the guy saying, "Sonmor, you've had these players," and he was going down Bilodeau, Beaton, Killer Hansen. Carlson, all these guys. And now Steve Durbano, he said, what makes you think you can control Steve Durbano? So I know me, I looked right at the TV and I said, what makes you think I want to control Steve Durbano? Well, that got me in more trouble.
Now,
we had,
but an honest answer
Bulls,
nonetheless.
Did you have like the Kenny Linsman?
Well, that year, Don, we had those crazy, those wild guys, but we also had Kenny Linsman, Rod Langway, Paul Henderson, Mark Napier, John Garrett. We had some very, very good players.